Iran and the US are holding indirect technical talks here in Doha on the Memorandum of Understanding they signed 2 weeks ago. Qatar and Pakistan are mediating the talks. Tehran says both the Strait of Hormuz and Iran's frozen assets are being discussed, though it has no plans to meet directly with the American delegation. Tehran's chief negotiator, Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, says the MoU must be fully implemented before talks on a final comprehensive deal.
We are determined to uphold the Memorandum of Understanding. In other words, we are engaged in dialogue. But if they refuse to implement what has been agreed through dialogue, we are prepared for war. We will respond. Under the agreement, within 30 days and about 80 days of that period have now passed to remove the technical obstacles in the strait, address navigational safety issues, deal with any mines or similar hazards that need to be cleared, and restore conditions so that the ships that had been there before the war can transit safely. For the first 60 days, we will not charge those vessels for these services.
The talks come as Iran state media reports that a container ship has run aground in the Strait of Hormuz. Reports say the vessel was taking a route not designated by Iran. The Revolutionary Guard has been insisting that ships transit closer to Iran's southern coast as opposed to the route closer to Oman's coast. It's not clear yet what happened to this vessel. Our correspondent Osama bin Javaid, who has covered the negotiations between the U.S. and Iran extensively, joins us here on set now. So, Osama, I know that you are probably, knowing you, getting some information now on these technical talks that are happening in Doha. It seems like trying to figure out how to implement every point of this MOU is still the topic of discussion for all these sides.
Absolutely, and that is something that has just been discussed between the Deputy Foreign Minister, Qasim Gharib-Abadi, who is here in Doha, and the Qatari Prime Minister. We've just now got confirmation that they have met, and a whole host of issues were discussed, including that implementation of the MOU as well as Lebanon, because Iran is playing a significant focus on Lebanon because it wants the first point of the agenda in the Memorandum of Understanding to be implemented, which means that cessation of hostilities on all fronts, including Lebanon. Iran wants the refugees to go back. That would mean the Israelis would have to end their occupation of Lebanese territory, and that remains a sticking point. But that's not the only one. This issue of the Strait of Hormuz and freedom of navigation is also a major point of concern for not just for the Gulf, but for the United States and other neighboring countries as well, including Oman, because as you mentioned that report about that ship running aground, it's essentially in the part of the Strait of Hormuz, which is towards the Omani waters, according to these Iranian claims. So a whole host of issues, a number of things being discussed. Diplomacy, again, happening here in the Qatari capital. The Prime Minister's met the Iranians, obviously, in the last 24 hours. He's also met the Americans, Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff. And the Lebanon issue also came up in that meeting.
So there's all these moving pieces happening here in Doha, but help the rest of us understand that aren't so involved in this diplomacy all the time, that don't maybe see it in action as much as you do. Are there concrete things happening in these technical talks? Are we getting closer to this MOU being fully implemented? It's been 2 weeks now. That's 2 weeks off of this 60-day timeline where we're looking for a larger, broader peace deal. Are there signs of progress happening?
Well, it depends on how you look at it. From the Iranian and the American perspective, there are signs of progress. The Strait of Hormuz is open. There's freedom of navigation, although there is some issues that are sticking. Iran wants every ship to go through its authority in the Strait of Hormuz that it has made. And then there is obviously the cessation of hostilities. You're not seeing the guns blaring again in the region. So those are concrete steps that have been taken. Everything else is going to be the more difficult part. And that is why the 60-day period for this 14-point Memorandum of Understanding, which is not a deal, might not be enough, as we've been told by various people involved in these talks, because there's so much detail that needs to go into every single aspect of it, not just the nuclear issue. What happens to the enriched uranium? What happens on the Strait of Hormuz? Who charges what in lieu of what? What happens to the US removing its troops from the vicinity of Iran? How does the implementation of the ceasefire translate into Lebanon? So there's a whole host of issues. And that is why we've been speaking to the Qataris, the Pakistanis, the mediators who are telling us that this is a very difficult task ahead for them to bring these sides together who still do not trust each other.
Yeah, you can't rush that kind of progress. Osama bin Javaid, thank you as always for your reporting. We appreciate it.